pre-show, and then like it was a lot of hurry up and wait today. And then I finally thought, okay, myself and Puka are going to be on the desk, and then Puka's like, actually, I got to go.
Yeah. He gets busy. He's a very wanted man.
He's a busy guy. That's what happens when you work for the Pokemon Company.
Yep.
It looks like we're going to be having a representative from Japan here in round number 4.
Yep, that's Koji Morimoto.
And I believe his opponent, Hampus Eriksson. Haven't seen quite yet what they're going to be playing. The Japanese players are in sort of a weird position when it comes to the World Championships because they do get sets released ahead of time, so they sort of have to rewind a little bit to fit in with our meta. But it's always really interesting to see them come out for the World Championships because they've got more information than we do. They've been playing with these cards longer than we have. You think that gives them a little bit of an edge?
Absolutely. So the fact that they have to rewind is kind of a good thing for them. They got to see what works and didn't work when they were playing in tournament against some of the best players in the world, and now they know what's gonna be effective for them. So they get to kind of take a step back and go, all right, man, if I could have done that differently, I would have played this. It's a little different, of course, being that they play a different format than us. They have a few more cards available when they go into a tournament, but the idea is the same, that they got a lot of use out of cards that we just saw scans of and had to kind of guess, this could be good, maybe this will work.
Well, this looks to be a deck that you had mentioned to me, Gardevoir and Sylveon GX. Very, very thin actual lines of Pokemon. Only 5 Pokemon in the deck, 4 Gardevoir and Sylveon GX, and a single copy of Xerneas GX, and then really trying to take quick knockouts with the Fairy Charms.
Right. So getting that Gardevoir and Sylveon tag team, especially starting with it without having to mulligan that much, that's pretty great. But you play so few Pokemon because it's so important that you do start that Pokemon. You want to be able to start to accelerate energies as fast as possible, and you can really start to manipulate what your opponent is doing when you get to use your GX attack. When you can take their entire hand away from them, you're going to be in a fantastic position.
All right, and on the other side, we've got an LGM on the bench. I've been hearing whispers of the Behem.
There are 2 of these in the entire field, and one is 3-0. All right.
Okay.
That's cool. I talked about saving the spice for day 2, but you know what? If it can get you through day 1, you might as well do it.
A well-seasoned dish is a delicious dish.
Absolutely.
And an 8-0 on day 1 would be certainly very tasty.
You don't even have to play the next 2 rounds. You just get to go. You can go sleep after 6.
What is the point of the deck? Why are we playing Quad Behem? What are we doing?
This is where we need Puka. He's the one who plays all these.
Paging Kyle Sukovich. Please come with note cards.
Oh, man. I'm sure we'll figure this out.
You know what? I take comfort in the fact that the players are better than I am. That's the way it should be.
Yeah, it's just impressive, the fact that a deck like this has flown so far under the radar that he can just show up at and probably take a lot of people by surprise.
Oh, I imagine there are plenty of players out there who are looking at these cards just like we are and going, what am I supposed to do against this?
Yep.
What's the point? Tag Team GX Pokemon, it's a lot more straightforward. Koji's looking to take very early knockouts with very powerful basic Pokemon. Hampus's deck is not quite so straightforward.
No. So, I am piecing together how this strategy works, and it seems very cool. So, you have the Behem, but you can use your Mysterious Noise. You have, it does 90 damage, and you shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it back into your deck. And then your opponent's not allowed to play any item cards. And it takes 3 energies, but you have triple energy acceleration. So you can just shuffle that energy back into your deck. And as long as you have a fair way to consistently shuffle these Pokemon in and then search them right back out, you can set up a chain that's pretty difficult to stop.
Well, we'll have to see if he's able to get that chain set up, because Koji is accelerating energy very quickly with Fairy Song. You can just search 2 Fairy Energy out of the deck and attach them to your bench in any way that you like. So already, 2 copies of Gardevoir and Sylveon GX are almost ready to go. Start hitting with that Kaleido Storm attack.
Yeah, and the fact that the Gardevoir and Sylveon can deal that the Kaleidostorm damage actually knocks out some Pokemon, where we're in a format where Pokemon have such huge amount of hit points that it's usually a two-shot. That's pretty important for Koji. If he can start to streamline some knockouts with that, he can put himself in a great spot. Unfortunately, he's playing up against a Luminous Barrier, which is kind of hard to get through with your Pokemon GX.
Yeah, it's looking like this this Behem strategy is just stall.
Yep.
Try to make it so that your opponent can't play any item cards, restrict the ability of GX and EX Pokemon to actually take knockouts, of which there are many in the field. So this would really restrict the potential of Pikachu and Zekrom GX if they're not also playing a heavy Zapdos line.
Yep.
Reshiram and Charizard GX if they are not also playing a single prize attacker. So I can certainly see how this would be something that would have flown under the radar. Before this, the stall decks were heavily based on like resource management or on Guru and Zoroark, and you can't play Zoroark anymore.
Right. Well, also looking at the list for Hampus, he has the U-turn boards, so he can use those to switch that Alolan Ninetales around from the active spot. He can consistently switch between attacking and then bringing up that Luminous Barrier ability so that he doesn't have to worry about any damage being dealt to him. Of course, there are some custom catchers that will be able to move around from that, but that's only 1 or 2 knockouts that you're avoiding. Koji is going to have to work his way through this Alolan Ninetales at some point, and I don't know how he does it.
Well, considering he has 5 GX Pokemon in his deck and no other Pokemon,
that doesn't sound good.
No, it sounds like this is going to be quite difficult. And like we were saying before, Guzma no longer in the standard format, so you can't as easily move around that Alolan Ninetales. It is a much more effective lock now than it would have been just a few short weeks ago.
This deck is very reminiscent of other decks that have done this. There was an Aselgor deck years and years ago that it has seen some play in the expanded format, but very, very similar strategy. Just shuffle yourself into the deck and bring up some Pokemon that will mess with your opponent. Back then it was Wobbuffet. You could just stop some abilities. Now there's cards like Alolan Ninetales. There's even a Gumi. There's a bunch of interesting things that you can put in the active spot and make your opponent go, oh man, I can't beat that.
And of course, players having to get a little bit creative with the supporter cards that they're using. Draw supporters specifically, we're seeing Hampus with Copycat and Tate and Liza in the deck. Of course, Tate and Liza can also be used as a switch, but it can shuffle your hand into your deck, draw 5 if you are lacking for a supporter that turn. And it seems like this is a deck that really needs to be as consistent as possible to get set up, even though consistency is going to be a little bit more difficult to achieve now that we've had so many of the power cards rotate out. That's going to be 90 damage onto the Gardevoir and Sylveon GX, and as we were saying, Koji has no counterattack potential while that Alolan Ninetales is in the active position. So it looks like, as of now, it's just going to be chipping away, and Koji's going to be rather helpless.
Yep. Hampus, of course, does have that Pidgeotto. It's like a little Zoroark. You get to see a few cards and consistently try to get through your deck. If you can thin down to a point where your deck really is just triple energy accelerators, Elgyem and Behems, then you're going to be in a pretty solid spot.
Put them on your opponent's active Pokemon.
So what happens if I have the Luminous Barrier? Can I still move them, but they go away?
So looks like having
just looking for
just
some
a question about
clarification.
The way things work. Of course, with a new set in the fold, and with so many players from over 50 different countries represented here this weekend, things might take a little bit longer with language barriers and with just lack of information about certain decks. Hampus is being one of them.
Yep. So it seems like Hampus is asking a question about Xerneas GX's GX attacks to see if Sanctuary would be able to knock out the Pokemon. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the damage would get placed on him, but then it just would not stay there. It would just be a way for Koji to remove damage from his side of the board, but the knockout would not come into play because the damage being placed is an effect of the attack.
And the attack is being committed by a GX Pokemon, which cannot deal damage to the Alolan Ninetales.
Yep. But of course, very important to clarify with all this, make sure the judges get in on it, translators as well, make sure that everyone is aware of how this is going to work.
So Polkog
Yeah, and I mean, this is why we've got very skilled judges at the tables to be able to answer these questions, because these things are going to come up.
Yeah, as hard as it is for us, just imagine for the judges as well. You have to be on it, knowing all of these cards and how their interactions work together. And you see a player drop the Elgyms and Pidgeys, and you're like, oh, man, I should probably know these, right?
Bust out the old Google search.
Right?
No, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of players here this weekend, so many decks to be able to understand all of the inner workings. That's tough. But we're going to see a Behem hit the board and a triple acceleration energy coming into play as well.
Just going to draw a couple extra cards here with the Lily as well. Sitting on multiple Gumi. Doesn't need that. Just going to keep using that Alolan Ninetales, as the Luminous Barrier is providing a huge benefit for him right now. So usually in a matchup for Koji, he's going to be playing against somebody who, when you use your GX attack, they are in complete top deck mode. And against Hampus, he's got Pidgeotto, so he can just draw right out of it. And that doesn't happen often in this format where Zoroark GX is no longer available. Most of the time, your opponent is trying to top deck any supporter that's left in their deck, and that can be difficult too because they used all of those supporters to set up. Instead, he's got 2 Pidgeotto, so he's going to be as consistent as possible, make sure that he has a way to get through his deck as best he can, and he's going to chain together these cards to try to thin down. I was actually kind of surprised that he chose not to use an Acrobike there, because you'd think he just wants to discard as many as he can, but he's going to keep all of those Elgyem pieces. Maybe that's something that he's afraid of. Counter catchers taking away all the Elgyms. I mean, just play around anything at this point, right?
Yeah, his goal is to every single turn be able to shuffle Elgyem back into the deck with that triple acceleration energy and lock down item usage for Koji on the following turn. And with him being unable to attack and deal damage, eventually this will go in Hampus's favor.
Yep. And look at all the item cards that are just building up over on Koji's side. And this is exactly why we see Hampus playing cards like Copycat. His opponent can't play any of these, so he builds up this huge hand. And then Hampus says, oh, I'll take 13 cards.
Yeah, seems
that sounds good.
The question is, does Koji even have a way out of this?
I mean, he's going to play until he can't no more.
I mean, never say die. You've made it this far.
I think we're just not allowed to ever say die.
Well, it depends on the context. In the context of a cliched saying.
Absolutely.
I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that I'm okay. But, well.
I'm in the boat with you now. All right, we see energy. Oh, excuse me, the tag switch. It's going to move those energies over to his Xerneas. And time to find out how this interaction works. Unless he's doing overrun.
Yeah, he's just going to deal the 20 damage to one of the bench Pokemon.
Cool.
I mean, if you can overrun enough. But,
like, do you need 4 energies to overrun? No. Is it cool? Yeah.
Yes. And you can see with a tag switch to be able to move the energy onto the Xerneas GX, get that damaged Gardevoir and Sylveon GX out of the active position. Then you could use the GX attack from Xerneas to move the damage from your Gardevoir and Sylveon GX onto an opponent's Pokemon. Because you're playing these Tag Team GX Pokemon, which do give up 3 prizes when they're knocked out, 2 Gardevoir and Sylveon GX knockouts, and suddenly the game is over. So you do need to be able to mitigate that damage somehow. There's very few Pokemon in this meta that can deal 270 damage with 1 hit.
Right. This is a great inclusion in Koji's list that I honestly haven't seen too much, and it makes so much sense, as both the Gardevoir and Sylveon tag teams could take tons and tons of damage, and you can just move all of that off.
260, my mistake.
And just have a very impressive turn. Once again, we just see Hampus's deck doing exactly what he wants to do. Gets to continue to deal 90 damage at a time. That Mysterious Noise is going to lock out all those items.
It really is so fascinating that control decks like this can exist in a meta for Pokemon where there are such big, powerful, basic Pokemon.
Yeah.
But even still, we have these really rather off-the-wall strategies that when you get them going, it seems like it's almost effortless.
It's honestly pretty brilliant, because the only card that manipulates your side is going to be a card like Reset Stamp, and you just block that because they can't use it when you use your attack. You just block the item. We used to have cards like N. I believe the only other effect we have was like Judge, and that's not terrible for Hampus. He'd get 4 cards and then get to use his Pidgeottos. He certainly could find a way out.
Yeah, Let Loose Marshadow has been rotated out with the Shining Legends. We're going to see a Mysterious Treasure, discarding the Pokemon Communication. And again, just Behem every single turn. After you shuffle it back into the deck, you bring back up the Alolan Ninetales, which cannot take damage from GX Pokemon. Rinse and repeat.
Yep. He keeps playing everything in the right order, too. He's not having any issues with that. Obviously knows what he's doing. Going to find himself his 6 cards. Then he gets to use his Pidgeotto ability. Find a couple more cards, pick out the right ones to make sure that this chain works. Finds triple energy acceleration. It's great for him. And yeah, he's got another one in hand. He's just going to keep on rolling. He plays the one that he just got there. It makes it seem like he didn't have one in his hand, which is a pretty nice way to do that too.
It can get to your opponent a little bit.
Absolutely. If you can play the top deck one, play the top deck one. You don't have to give away that info. You can make it seem like you just ripped it.
Especially when you're going to be playing 15+ rounds of Swiss over 2 days. Mental fatigue certainly comes into play, so.
And this is a demoralizing matchup for Koji. He just doesn't have a way through this.
Oh, so. This is certainly one where if you weren't on stream, he may have already just said, I can't possibly win. Yeah.
This is rough. Going to use his Kaleidostorm and move some energies.
Professor Elm's Lecture to pull out some basic Pokemon. Just keep the engine going.
Yeah, this is beautiful. He just gets to pull all these Pokemon. We noticed with all of his Acrobikes, he kept selecting basic Pokemon as well and not whatever the other card is. This means that when he has a card like Lecture, he gets a lot of use out of it because he gets to keep all these cards in his hand, and then eventually his deck just becomes basic Pokemon and cards that can get him this chain. And he holds all the basic Pokemon in his hand and then just keeps the chain running. It's never going to run out. He never decks out and just has this 90, 90, 90, go.
And as you see, I mean, it's to the point where he doesn't even need to promote it to the active to
we all know what's happening.
Use the attack and shuffle it back into the deck. Koji knows what's going on.
Yep. He wishes that it was something different, but yeah, this is where we're at.
And with Xerneas already having taken all of the damage off of the board once, now this damage is going to stick. There are great potions in the deck for Koji, which could maybe buy him a little bit more time, but buy him time to do what exactly?
Exactly, yep.
He would need to take 6 knockouts.
The deck is getting to a pretty sweet spot, about maybe 10 cards. Of course, he'd love to get it down to like 5. That's where you're going to see just about everything you could possibly want over and over again. Yeah, this is working out fantastically for Hampus.
Yeah, there just are not enough custom catchers for this to ever end up in Koji's favor.
Yeah, I feel like it has to be a very aggressive start from Koji or some pretty wicked prize cards over for Hampus for this to match to get weird.
Yeah, several triple acceleration energy it would have to be. Or obviously that Luminous Barrier, Alolan Ninetales being prized would give Koji a lot more breathing room.
Yeah, that definitely could do it.
Really interesting. I was not expecting to see anything quite like this weekend. I was thinking it's going to be, and I'm sure the vast majority of the matchups are big tag team against big tag team trying to take the prizes very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy that we've got such diversity.
Yeah, of all the single prize attacking Pokemon that are available, everyone thought Malamar was just the best way to go about that. But, I mean, look at this. This looks pretty good.
90 damage, back in deck, items are locked.
Yeah, Hampus has this list built so consistently too. He's got a 2/2 line of the Alolan Ninetales as well, so prizing that can be difficult. Has Dittos so that he can have the potential to evolve just through there. A lot of consistency cards.
I mean, it's to the point where Koji's just
This is just
drawing and passing
good.
back every single turn.
Yeah.
Hampus is kind of styling on him.
That's safe to say.
But again, this is what you said. There's 2 of this particular stall deck in the entire tournament today.
In the entire field, they're both in Masters, I believe.
So rather unlucky for Koji Morimoto to have hit this matchup.
Oh,
but
for sure. And on
darn
stream.
sure he's not going to hit it again for the rest of the weekend.
That would be pretty wicked if you saw the second one, too.
Yeah.
But props to him for staying in this matchup. He's going to continue to fight through. Maybe something happens. There's
Human error is a thing.
Yep.
If he has to hope that Hampus is going to mess up, I mean, a 0.1% chance is better than a 0% chance.
I mean, anytime that you look at an extra card, you could get a prize penalty. So there's options there, and yeah.
Happens.
It looks like Koji is just gonna pick it up this time around. Try again in the next round, or in the next game here of our set. Getting ahead of myself.
You're already going into round number 5. You're like, okay. Well, we tried. Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to prepare for all possible situations that could arise in a tournament with this many players.
Yep.
So Gardevoir Sylveon, obviously up until now at 3-0, has been working very well for Koji. And I'm sure against the real heavy hitters in this tournament that he was preparing for, he thought this is a very well-positioned deck. He was not prepared for something like this, and this is just an unfortunate pairing for him. But it happens.
Yep, and I don't even know what he could really add to his deck to help him in a situation like this. It's kind of, you would have to completely change how your deck looks in order to have success.
60 different cards.
Yeah.
And even then, that lock is powerful.
Yeah. Hampus might have game against a lot of different decks. This is, when it gets rolling, it's very impressive.
Yeah, I would love to see his pairings up until now and see. I mean, I'm sure that he's hitting almost exactly what he expected to hit, which are big GX tag team Pokemon.
Yep.
Although a fair amount of the GX Pokemon, Pikachu and Zekrom GX, for instance, are running single prize attackers like Zapdos to be able to sort of get around that Alolan Ninetales ability. It just so happens that Koji is not one of those decks with that flexibility. But what it lacks in flexibility, it gains in consistency in the matchups it expects to see.
Right. And that's all you really want to do in day one. You want to make sure that you have the most consistency possible so that you can just win the 5 or 6 games, depending on how many people show up. Looks like he's going to have to win 6 here today.
Yeah, 6 and 2 gets you through to day number 2, where it's a fresh start. Wipe the slate clean.
And then maybe you play your own Behemoth deck. Get it going.
A couple of U-turn boards prized, but did not see both copies of Alolan Ninetales in there. So safe to say the lock is alive. And Koji had a very fast setup on the last game. He started Gardevoir and Sylveon, had one on the bench, both with energy on them by turn 2. Still wasn't fast enough. And we see Hampus even found that Alolan Vulpix very quickly.
Yeah, that's exactly what he wants to see. Koji off of that Pokegear, just going to take the Cynthia. And awkwardly enough, did start the one Pokemon that wasn't his Gardevoir and Sylveon. Sure, he's played through a few matchups, at least on his side of the board, where he has to figure out what to do with the Xerneas in the active spot, but it's not the worst Pokemon. At least you can get some damage down onto the basics. Maybe we see Hampus have a hard time trying to evolve that Alolan Vulpix, and you can get some overrun damage in there.
Yeah, there's certainly some value to actually being able to attack on the first turn. Whereas with Gardevoir and Sylveon, it is just setting up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but going to pass it back over. Let's see what Hampus has available to him here on turn 1. Looks like a very supporter-heavy hand, but he does have the Elms Lecture to be able to pull out those basics.
Yeah, that's a great card for him. He's going to be able to find probably multiple copies of that Alolan Vulpix just to guarantee that he has more of a chance to lock in that Alolan Ninetales. If he gets that, he's going to be in a great spot. That Ditto Prism Star is always one of your top choices because it can turn into anything for you. You just want to make sure that when you do play it, maybe you have at least one evolution. You don't want to run directly into the overrun, being that you only have 40 hit points. So we'll see if he decides to directly play that down. Maybe he does have a Pokemon evolution in his hand, and he's ready to just evolve as fast as possible.
Yeah, that Ditto is very fragile. You don't want to just play it down to essentially sacrifice it.
Yep. All right.
Looks like we're going to see some overrunning happening here for Koji.
Well,
that is going to be Green's exploration up first.
One of the few turns that he can take advantage of item cards. He was having a hard time finding it. I mean, once the chain started, I don't think it ever broke.
No.
It went from turn 3 to turn 17 or however long it was. Yeah, it was pretty wicked.
With the Pidgeotos every turn being able to draw so consistently into the Behem and the triple acceleration energy, it just wasn't an issue for Hampus at all. But Koji is going to pull out Gardevoir and Sylveon GX. Did not do much good in the previous game, but when you've got one strategy, you have to roll with it.
Yep. There of course, is the potential that he could get a ton of energies onto his Gardevoir and Sylveon before the Alolan Ninetales gets into play. Maybe you can remove the entire hand, and then your opponent just never finds the Alolan Ninetales. Is that a lot to ask? Yeah, it takes 6 energies, but what else are you going to go for? Man, being able to search out these Pidgeotos, being that they only have 60 hit points, is so good. That's a great card for him.
We're very used to Professor Elm's lecture only being able to get basic Pokemon. Obviously, it was sort of a replacement for Bridget when that rotated, and we were seeing people use it with Zorua occasionally, and Ditto Prism, of course, but never with stage 1s.
I love this play. He decided to play the 2 Pidgeotos, and he's holding the other one just in case he doesn't have the correct evolution for his Ditto. If he does need to keep looking for the Alolan Ninetales, he can do that with the 3rd Pidgeotto, and he's really just got to decide what's the best route for him here.
It looks like he did end up finding it.
So yeah, I mean, he only needs 1, so he could just play it onto the Alolan Vulpix. May just be wondering if there's anything that Koji had that maybe he didn't see in the first game, but it looks like he chose the correct path here.
And he is going to find a Behem off of that 3rd Airmail. Evolve the Alolan Vulpix into the Alolan Ninetales. You can evolve the Elgyem that he's now moved to the bench. He's just going to hold it.
Getting that U-turn board onto the Elgyem as well is fantastic because he can always shuffle that back in. Eventually, it'll find its rightful home onto the Alolan Ninetales.
An Overrun still can deal 20 damage to the bench, but of course it will not be dealing damage to Alolan Ninetales. But the item lock is not in effect yet.
Correct. So although it is pretty bleak that the Alolan Ninetales is locked in, there's hope. It's very difficult, but 20 damage at a time, we could see this happen.
I mean, right now, Koji's just hoping that Hampus has prized his Behems, or they're buried deep in his deck and he's not going to have access to them. But obviously with cards like Pokemon Communication, he can just pull them out if he has another Pokemon to shuffle in.
Yep. This gets a little awkward if he doesn't have access to a U-turn board, and yeah, he did not. So he's just going to hold everything.
We did see he actually has 2 of those prized. So 3rd one in play already.
Yeah, that actually could be pretty important. He needs to find a way to move these Pokemon around, and I don't know if he has that unless he uses a triple energy acceleration.
It's not like he's going to be taking a quick knockout here to be able to get access to his prize cards.
Yeah, he's going to take away this Pokemon here.
And that is going to be first prize taken for Koji. Able to get rid of that LGM before it's able to evolve into the Behem, which means Hampus now is going to need to take a little bit of extra time. If there's another pair of counter catchers for Koji, maybe he can stop this train before it ever gets out of the station.
So Tate and Liza is one way around this, of course. But does he have enough that he can chain together in order to take a knockout? Because finding that U-turn board is huge, and if he does not have access to it, it really means he's kind of stuck. He just has to take 20 damage at a time, and he's in a bad spot. There's a reset stamp. this is the game that Koji needed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there is the added effect of, obviously, when U-turn board is discarded, it goes back into your hand instead of into the discard, but it's no good if there isn't a Boehiam also in play for Hampus.
Yep. Does have to go find it again. Of course, has all those Pidgeotto, but we could see Overrun potentially taking one of these off the board this turn.
Again, 60 hit points, pretty fragile. But with item cards available, Koji is at least able to put up a fight here. This is certainly more interesting for him than the previous game was, and that is going to be a knockout onto the first Pidgeotto.
Slow and steady.
Sometimes it wins the race. It depends on, like, if halfway through the race it actually turns into a game of solitaire, which is what Hampus is kind of trying to do here.
Yeah, he loves solitaire from how this deck functions.
Big fan.
Well, he has a ton of Pokemon now with access to that lecture. Even thinking grabbing another Vulpix. Why not?
Just in case.
If anything, just to thin it out so that you can start finding cards that you really want to have access to. If you can't find that U-turn board, then you can be right back in it. All
right, so 3 LGM hitting the bench.
Yep. Got to play these in multiples. As you know, your opponent does have access to custom catchers. Unfortunately for Koji, he just has one more set, so it's going to be pretty difficult to get it timed out right.
Koji can continue to overrun, try to take a knockout on another one of the Pidgeotto in a couple turns.
All right, another 20. Slowly working his way onto that next Pidgeotto. All right, so now we need to see these Pidgeotto start to find ways to move. Interesting that Hampus decided not to take that Titanize. That was a way to potentially get this going. He could have used it as a switching effect, but maybe he just doesn't have access to enough right now, and he just wants more.
I think to us, it looks like because Koji is putting on so much more pressure than he did in the previous game, that things are going much better for him. But I think Hampus still feels pretty in control here, all things considered.
Yeah, it takes a long time for this Xerneas to make an impact. And yes, it started for sure, but as long as one Pidgeotto is around, I feel like Hampus can get through his deck at a pretty reasonable rate. Especially with the size of his hand. If he can start to set to avoid cards like that reset stamp once the chain gets rolling, he's going to be in a good spot. It's going to be up to Koji to find one of those and pair it with knockouts on Pidgeottos. If he can shut down the hand and remove any of the draw, we could see the 20s actually just be enough.
Just a draw pass for Koji. Hampus using that Pidgeotto ability again to be able to take one of the top 2 cards of the deck. He says it's still not time. So what needs to happen here, I guess, that would be really poor for Hampus, for Koji to be able to take this game? So it seems like an unlikely series of events, but it's still possible.
Yeah, I think it completely banks on the timing of reset stamp. If Koji is able to play that and pair it along with the knockout on the Pidgeotto, then we can see where this game completely turns around. And Hampus is always, of course, going to be trying to avoid that. He's trying to make his hand as big as possible before he finally decides to go in. knowing that if his Pidgeotos are starting to run out of some time here, and he's been doing that, but you need to get the item lock established pretty soon because this is probably the last turn that reset stamp could really, really hurt you.
Yeah, I mean, the item lock was established so quickly in the previous game that this is taking much, much longer. And it is a real luxury that Hampus has that in this matchup in particular, he can afford to take this long to get his ideal game plan in place. But it really is entirely on the back of Alolan Ninetales right now. One more overrun, and the final Pidgeotto will be knocked out.
So many cards in Hampus's hand. Not sure if he has the Tate and Liza available to him to start to switch around into the active spot. Pidgeotto, if he could find U-turn Bird, oh man, he found it. That's huge for him. He needed to lock out the potential reset stamp here, and he was able to find that.
Yeah, having prized 2 of the U-turn boards really delayed this strategy quite a bit for Hampus this game, but he finds it right in the nick of time. This is going to lock out all items for Koji on the following turn, so reset stamp will not be able to disrupt Hampus's hand.
Fortunately for Koji, he will be able to remove that Pidgeotto, and we could see turns where the lock just wouldn't stay in place. And that's all that Koji really needs, is just for this thing to slow down and to get his overrun damage to continue. I don't know if that means that he needs to remove damage from his Xerneas, but he needs to make sure that this thing stays alive for as long as possible. He needs to get as much mileage as he can because he doesn't have many ways to do damage other than overrun, dealing 20 to the bench. Fortunately for Koji, there's 3 Pokemon that he does have the ability to knock out on the bench right now, but honestly, Hampus could put himself in a situation where he just shuffles in one of those Elgyms, and he could only leave 2 Pokemon that are potentially able to be knocked out, and then he just passes and wins a game that way, nice and slow.
I mean, Koji does have, of course, the GX attack of Xerneas to be able to take all of the damage away from the board, Sanctuary GX, as well as some great potions in the deck to be able to buy time, but it's just not enough. Hampus will have more ways to stall than Koji will.
Yeah.
So with Overrun only dealing 20 damage every single turn, and having to commit so much to be able to knock out a single LGM or Behem, this is going to take a very long time, but it does look like it is going to be in favor of Hampus. Now we do only have 14 minutes left on the round, actually, though this one did look like it was very strongly in favor of Hampus Eriksson. Koji has played it out, and I really commend him for that because, like you were saying earlier, these are matchups that can be rather demoralizing. You can feel pretty bad about it, but the ability to recognize that you got to play your outs even in the worst possible situation, and that ultimately this is just a bad break and this is not going to happen to you every round, and the ability to be able to then come back from that, pick yourself up, and perform your best in your following rounds is really key. And it seems like Koji is definitely an experienced enough player to be able to do those things.
Yeah, this is very hard for any player to go through. You know that you're in a matchup where 99% of the time it is not going to work for you. But if you're not playing to that 1%, then do you really belong on the world stage? This is where you have to make your best attempt at it. And once this game is over, once this match is settled, just put it in the back of your mind. This is never going to happen again. If you run up against one of these players, something's really wrong with this tournament. There's only 2 of these available. Yeah, this is a clinic. Just constantly going to be streamlining all of these Pokemon. Mysterious Noise over and over and over again. So much damage being placed, and the restrictions that are put on Koji, it's just too much.
U-turn board gives the Alolan Ninetales free retreat every single turn, so he retreats it, moves up the Behem, attacks, deals 90 damage, shuffles it back into the deck. Alolan Ninetales comes right back out in front, and as long as Hampus has a Behem and a triple acceleration energy on the following turn, he can keep it going.
Yeah, and passing with that Gardevoir and Sylveon tag team in the active spot means that it can be potentially knocked out here, but doesn't have many other options. Can't bring that Xerneas into the active without putting it at risk of being knocked out as well.
Sylvel IGX making a very brief appearance. And that is going to be 3 prizes for Hampus Eriksson, taking a knockout onto the Gardevoir and Sylveon GX. But Koji can take a 3rd Pidgeotto knockout here.
Yep, just going to use his GX attack for the game, move that damage off, buy himself one more turn. And we'll see if it makes an impact. Hampus actually doesn't have many pieces of his combo in his hand right now.
Really taking those early knockouts onto the Pidgeotos and limiting the amount of search capability that Hampus has every single turn has finally, now it seems, started to take a toll.
So he did have that Pokegear to shuffle and get Lily. There was potential that he could play the Pokegear earlier and start to shuffle his deck a little more, maybe find better cards, but at this point, you just keep going, try to find something. He's going to thin out his deck as much as possible.
See a couple of those triple acceleration energy appear there off of the Pokegear, but he needs those in hand.
Yeah, I don't think he has many supporters left, honestly.
Hand size is certainly too big for Lily to be terribly influential.
This is
Saw
where
him playing Copycat in the previous game.
Some decks of the past that were like this, they had access to cards like Professor Juniper or Professor Sycamore. They could discard a big hand like this, which is just full of all that excess, and then your deck is only the juice. And when you have that, you're just going to run through everyone. But he really doesn't have a way to get through all of these excess cards in his hand.
He's going to attach that U-turn board. Asks, how many cards does Koji have in hand?
Might be time for a copycat. He did play out as many cards as he could, or at least so it seems. Maybe he could play that adventure bag and just burn it.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. So shuffle hand into the deck. He's going to be drawing to, looked like about 13 cards or so. It needs to find that triple acceleration energy to be able to attack with Behem this turn and keep that item lock in place.
Right. So many cards. Oh, we're back in the Colress days.
And he does find
it.
Finds two, actually.
Yeah, this is exactly what he wanted to find. He drew the right half of his deck there.
Yeah, 11 cards, it seems. And that is going to shuffle Behem back into the deck. 90 damage onto the Xerneas. And that is setting up for a two-hit knockout onto the Xerneas GX. Great Potion cannot be used because items are locked. Sanctuary GX has already been used, but that is going to be another knocked out Pidgeotto with Overrun.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the stinger. Was able to remove that Pidgeotto, but sees that his Xerneas is in a lot of trouble here. Hampus would love to find himself another basic Pokemon, does find that here.
And the Xerneas is, unfortunately for Koji, the only way he can actually deal damage past that Alolan Ninetales. So one prize remaining for Hampus. Gardevoir and Sylveon GX is going to come up into the active. But without items to bring back that Xerneas to keep attacking with Overrun, I don't see where these two prizes are coming from.
It's tough.
Tough's a word for it.
And, I mean, Hampus could just shuffle in and just pass for the rest of the game, and he'd be fine, too. Like, even going to play out his Goomy. Goomy needs love, too.
Give Goomy an appearance. There's a Goomy on the prize wall that I'm eyeing up.
See? All right.
Good to see Goomy getting a little screen time.
It has snuck its way into some decks before, but this does make a lot of sense. Man, this is just good.
90 damage, items locked. And again, Hampus is in a situation where he's got to find triple XL and a Behem for next turn. There it is.
Yep, keeps finding it. This is working out fantastic. Also gets to thin out one more, get that communication down. Has a Lily in hand as well. Can draw up, and then looks like he's about one more attack away from clearing out round 4 for him here, getting himself to a 4-0 record.
Big accomplishment considering how talented this field of players is who've been working for the entire year to qualify for this tournament. And Hampus rocks up with a deck that very few people, I think, were expecting to be anything that they should worry about.
That's fair to say, for sure.
But clearly, he had a good read because this is working out fabulously for him.
I had a good read as well, getting to read all of these cards that he plays. And there it is.
Yeah. Koji Morimoto, he put up quite a fight in game number 2, but Hampus Eriksson just, his deck had him beat from turn number 1, it seems. It's very rare that we have a matchup in Pokemon TCG that is this one-sided.
Yeah.
But certainly, Hampus Eriksson has found a deck that really can take this field by storm.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the other matchups in my head of just how they really work out.